Hi guys, and I'm back with another video for you. This video is about one of the ultimate celebrity dysfunctional families. That's all that I can call it. It was a very dysfunctional family. And this story is about the late great Marvin Gaye Jr. Marvin Gaye, if you don't know, was a soul singer, very popular with songs like I Heard It Through the Grapevine and Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Sexual Healing. When he was a very young boy, he lived in Washington, D.C. His father was a preacher, and his mother was a domestic help. She was a housekeeper for people. The father wasn't just a preacher. He was a very strict Pentecostal preacher. And for those not familiar with that faith, in that faith, you can't wear your skirts too short. You can't listen to secular music. You're not able to watch TV or listen to the radio. You're supposed to spend most of your time studying the Bible or spending time with your family. And Marvin did that because that's what the family did. Marvin sang in the church choir in the church as well. But it seemed as though no matter what Marvin would do, his dad, Marvin Gaye Sr., would not approve. He was very harsh and very strict with Marvin, which is interesting because at the same time that Marvin Gaye Sr. was so strict with his son, he was a cross-dresser. He literally would come out of his church clothes or sit around for the day, and he'd have on a dress and pumps and women's blouses and frilly hats and all of that. He thought nothing about that at all. And his wife didn't seem to say anything either. But Marvin had to be perfect. Marvin was afraid that his dad's behavior was like it was contagious. So much so that when Marvin became a recording artist, he put an E at the end of his name, Gaye, because he did not want people to associate any sexual connotations of his last name to him, because he wasn't gay. Marvin always took the harshness of his father, primarily because his mother just poured Marvin with love. Marvin walked on air as far as his mother was concerned, and she loved him dearly. She smothered him with love and attention and affection, and the dad seemed as though he was almost jealous of the amount of attention that Marvin would get. So any chance he could get to chastise Marvin, he would do so. At the age of 20, Marvin finally was able to move out of that house, and he went right to Detroit because he heard about a small record company by the name of Motown. He presented himself to Berry Gordy, and Berry Gordy signed him right away. Berry knew that he had a gold mine in Marvin. Marvin was tall and slender. He was very handsome. He had an incredible voice. He had a sensitive energy and nature that he knew that would appeal to women, and that he would be able to give him music that would allow him to cross over from soul music into pop music as well. And that's what happened. In 1968, he had his first hit, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, and that made him an incredible star at that point. By the end of the 1970s, as a matter of fact, he was the most famous musician in the world, even over Elvis Presley. He was just that famous worldwide. However, starting about in July of 1983, it had been before this, but things were escalating, and he started smoking marijuana. And smoking marijuana really hurt his vocal cords, so he was just throwing his voice away. The tone and the timbre and everything that was in his voice, the smoking was messing it up. He also was smoking PCP, which is a hallucinogenic drug, and this caused him to have a tremendous amount of paranoia. Along with the PCP and the marijuana, he was addicted to cocaine. The cocaine gave him the courage and the energy to perform on stage. However, the paranoia was really taking over on him because as he would do more drugs, he would get more paranoia. as he would get more paranoid, he would do more drugs. It was just a vicious cycle that he was caught in. He was the amount of drugs that he had was so strong, especially with the cocaine going in his nose, that he had an ulcer in his nostril that came from abusing cocaine, sniffing up something. One of the reasons that people say that Marvin really got so lost in the drug world is because of the lady Tammy Terrell that he sang with. Tammy Terrell was also a Motown singer, beautiful singer. She sang duet and very famous song for him, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. And she was just a wonderful singer. Along the way, though, she ended up having a aneurysm or tumor on her brain. One of those she had. And it was getting worse, so much so that one night they were doing a concert on stage and she collapsed on stage. And Marvin was there to catch her and to bring her backstage. It ended up that she had to end her singing career because she quickly had surgery, many surgeries. She became wheelchair bound. She wasn't able to sing like that anymore. Even though one of her last appearances was in a wheelchair, Marvin had brought her down to the stage at a show that he was doing. But she did pass away. She was very young, in her early 20s, 24, 25 years old. And this really devastated Marvin. Not because he was in a love affair with her. He loved her as her protector, her big brother, her shoulder to cry on. And he really empathized with her. He was so compassionate with her. And this really devastated him. So it caused him, people believe, to get deeper and deeper into drugs. So much so that he was getting depressed. He was paranoid, he was depressed, he was in a deep psychosis. At one point, he even went to Belgium. He wanted to escape the drug use and just, get a fresh start. And he did go to Belgium. And actually, while he was there, it was good for him because he ended up getting clean. He started exercising and eating healthy, just completely staying clean off of substances. Now, he stayed over there for a few years, and then he made his way finally back to the stateside. And once he got back to the States, the same thing happened again. People came to him with different drugs, cocaine, marijuana, whatever he wanted, and he started with that again. In fact, so much so that on May 3rd, 1983, he found himself hospitalized for extreme fatigue and dehydration. It really was a combination of his depression as it was diagnosed. And so he had to stay in there and try to clean out. But unfortunately, he was unable to really conquer that drug addiction. Now, by March 1st, 1984, he moved back into his parents' house. He said that he wanted to live there because he wanted to take care of his mother because she had ailing health. Now, while Marvin was there, initially when he moved there, he was still himself, more upbeat and into life. He would have a lot of company coming over, a lot of people coming in and out. They would be smoking marijuana, doing cocaine, smoking PCP, drinking alcohol, playing lots of music. And needless to say, this really upset the dad. The dad still, although he wasn't actively preaching, he was still cross-dressing, and he was still very strict in the way he wanted his house to be run. And Dad was becoming more and more annoyed. Now, by the 18th of March of 1984, we now find Marvin is withdrawing more. And he seemed to be just in his room always getting high. The atmosphere in the home, according to his brother-in-law, they say, was very somber and tense and quiet. And Marvin was even more paranoid. He thought he was hearing voices speaking to him. The phone wouldn't even be ringing, and he thought it was ringing. He'd pick it up and answer it, and he thought he heard voices, but it was just the dial tone. So much so that he even pulled the telephone cord out of the wall so he could stop hearing it ring. About this time, he gave his father a Smith & Wesson gun. His thought was his dad can help him protect the house. If whoever was going to shoot him was going to come in the house, he would be safer. Everybody would be safe. But this turned out to be not a very good idea. Now, March 20th, 1984, about 2 weeks before Marvin's death, he actually went to his father's room, took the gun out of his father's bedside table, laid in his bed. He was intoxicated from drugs, but he took the gun and he put it up to his temple with the intention of killing himself. Fortunately, his brother happened to be home that day and came looking for Marvin and found Marvin laying in bed with the Smith & Wesson to his head. His brother was able to intervene and talk him out of killing himself, and he ended up giving the gun to his brother. This is not the first time, though, that Marvin had attempted suicide. 4 years prior to this, about 1980, Marvin had decided he was going to end his life then, and he took a slew of medication, prescription medication, pills, drugs, in order to kill himself. But unfortunately, or fortunately, he lived. He wasn't able to kill himself. Now, at the same time that Marvin was going through his addictions in his room, locked away, Dad was in his room, locked away. The dad was a deep, serious alcoholic. Dad would drink morning, noon, and night. He would start in the morning drinking vodka and be kind of fun and loose, and by the time the evening come, he was very angry and just upset at every little thing. And so it was really a volatile environment being in. Even Marvin Gaye's brother's wife, his sister-in-law, told him, don't go over to the house anymore. It's too much drama going over there. Something bad's going to happen. I don't want you to get caught in it. But he still felt a responsibility because the house was huge, and then there was another house in the back, and the brother and his wife lived in the house in the back of the main house. So the brother had to go in from time to time to check on the situation. Now, on March 30th, 1984, 2 days before Marvin's death, the house just seemed, according to his brother, full of pressure and more tension than ever. The two gentlemen both were hiding in their separate rooms, and they both were clearly addicted, and the atmosphere was just completely unpredictable. 1 minute, everyone was quiet and not saying anything, and next minute there'd be a big explosion. And this was going back and forth. On March 31st, Marvin had decided that this might be the end of his life. He had been talking about with a friend of his that, he had seen angels that were coming down, they were talking to him. He'd seen people passed away. To this same friend, he even told his friend how much he loved him and how much he meant to him, and, in case I don't see you anymore. And this was devastating to the friend. They had been friends for a long time. And the friend, though, did not know to the extent that trouble that Marvin was in through his addictions, because Marvin would not let anyone come to the house. Then Marvin decides, I'm going to start studying the Bible. I'm going to get really serious with it and get back to my old self. So on that 31st, he was studying the Bible with his mother. They were sitting in the mother's room because the mother and fathers had separate bedrooms. He was sitting there with Alberta, his mother, studying the Bible. Suddenly they hear a big racket in the father's room. Things are tossing around. They don't know what's going on. The father storms across the hall to his wife Alberta's room, and he starts yelling at her about some documents that he couldn't find. And he just knew that she had taken these documents and had hid them or destroyed them with no evidence at all, but this is just his alcoholic behavior again. Marvin intervenes and, calms his dad down and tries to tell him that she doesn't know anything about these documents that you are yelling about. Leave her alone. And, of course, the father got really angry because he felt like, this is my house. Even though Marvin bought the house, by the way, let me just tell you that. But the father felt like, this is my house. I do what I want to do. This is my wife. You don't tell me what to do. I'm your dad. Well, the dad ended up going back into the room that day. But the very next day, on April 1st, 1984, Marvin and his mother were in the room doing Bible study once again. Everything was super quiet in the house, and they were just praising the Lord. And once again, the dad burst in the room. He's once again looking for these documents. Nobody even knows what documents he's talking about. They have no idea what documents, where they are. But right away, he starts blaming Alberta, his wife, that she took him, she did something with him. Now, Marvin steps in. He wants to intervene between his father and his mom and stop the argument. He kind of backs his father up into his father's room where they are yelling and hollering and arguing about these documents and anything else that came up. At this point, Marvin and his dad are in the dad's bedroom. Marvin Jr. then takes a swing at his dad, knocks his dad down, and then he walks out of the room back into his mother Alberta's room. It wasn't very long after that Marvin Sr. goes into his bedside table, pulls out that same Smith & Wesson, and he walks across the hall to Alberta's room with a gun aiming directly at Marvin. And he shoots the gun. Initially, he shoots Marvin in the left shoulder. The bullet goes in through the clavicle and out. So Marvin at this point is not fatally wounded. Marvin had any number of opportunities at this time to jump up to his feet because he was only 44. He was going to be 45 the next day. He was only 44. He could have jumped up on his feet and stopped his father. Instead, he laid down there and on his knees, and he looked his father in the eye as if to say, "Go ahead, it's your time, go ahead." And the father, as he was backing up, took another shot, and he shot Marvin right in the right chest, right above the nipple. The bullet went in at an angle, so it didn't go into his heart. It went down through his internal organs and out his side of his body. And Marvin laid there in a pool of blood. At this time, Marvin's brother ran into the house. He could hear the shooting from his house. He ran in to see what was going on. He found his mother hysterical. The father was leaving out the door, and Marvin was on the floor in a pool of blood. His father wasn't out the door. His father was in the room with the gun that he had just used. I'm sorry about that. They called 911, and the ambulance did come. But the ambulance would not come in the house until Marvin Gaye Sr. would leave the house or did not have possession of the gun because they didn't want to put themselves in danger. They didn't know, was he shooting everybody? They did not know what was going on because the ambulance got there first. And it was 20 minutes before they were even able to get to Marvin to work on him laying there in his mother's room. Marvin could have lived. He could have lived, but he didn't, but he could have. It ended up that his Marvin's brother's wife, or their daughter-in-law, Marvin Sr.'s daughter-in-law, came into the room. She got the gun away from Marvin Sr., and Marvin Sr. then leaves the house because the ambulance, nobody knows what's going on, and he leaves. They finally get Marvin to the hospital, and because of the amount of blood that he had lost in those 20 minutes, because he just basically bled out, he could have lived. But because, like I said, 20 minutes went by before the ambulance, the doctors or anybody could work on him, he died and in surgery. They tried to go in and get the bullet out, but it was way too late at that point. Ultimately, they arrested Marvin Gaye Sr. They charged him with manslaughter. They went to trial, and they ended up saying that Marvin Sr. would be charged with voluntary manslaughter. However, with a caveat. When they did an examination on Marvin Sr. to see if he was in his right mind, was he mentally stable, they also did a CAT scan on him. And they found that he had a brain tumor that was so close to vital areas of his brain that one day it appeared like he would be fine, and the next day he would be completely out of it and not even know who you were, along with his long-stemming alcoholism. And so his defense used this team of his alcoholism and his brain tumor to say that he was mentally unstable. And ultimately, the judge declared him mentally unstable. They gave him 6 years suspended sentence. He never spent any time in jail, significant time in jail. Ultimately, he was off of the jail time, off of the probation, and he died 14 years later from a heart attack. Now let's look at this family dynamic. Okay, so I want to look at Marvin Gaye Jr., Marvin Gaye Sr., and Alberta, because this was a very peculiar dynamic, and it tells you a lot about these particular people. Marvin's birthday was April 2nd, 1939. That makes him his life path a number 1. So that meant that all his time growing up, that is the reason why his father was having a hard time with him. That number 1 says, I want to do it my way. I know what I'm doing. I'll do it by myself. I'm solo. I'm independent. I'll figure this out myself. Everything is about me, 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 me. I can do it myself. Whereas the father was more about control. And Marvin Jr. was not going to be controlled. Marvin, personal year at that time, because he got killed the day before his birthday, that 1984 was a number 4 year, but it was still a number 3 year officially for Marvin Jr., so he was in a number 9 year going into a number 1 year, and that meant his cycle was coming to an end, and he was going to start something new, a new cycle. But he did start a new cycle, he just didn't start it here. It was indicative that this was going to be the end for him. He just didn't know it with that number 9 year. Now listen, that doesn't mean everybody in number 9 year is going to lose their life. But because of the way that he lived his life, that is what happened to him. Marvin was always very sensitive. And you can see that his rising is in Cancer. So that meant he would be very sensitive, very empathetic, very caring for other people. He had a sun in Aries, so he could care about you, but then he would rush into things. You know, maybe he thought he was going to save you or help you in some way. He would rush in to go and do those things. Although he had a tendency to start stuff and not finish things. I'll tell you what really stood out for me was his Mercury in Aries, which means he was gung-ho for whatever. That's why he could go in and do drugs and do things. He would just go for it. His Venus is in Pisces, and man, oh man, that is a heavy spot. When you have a Venus in Pisces, you tend to want to be the savior of people. That's why he came home to take care of his mom. You tend to be a martyr, okay? Even sacrificing yourself, which is what he did in his death. For this person, you have a tendency to let things slide or to be lazy in things. You don't really like mundane life. You rather live life in fantasy and a dreaminess to you. That's more preferable to you. He also had a Jupiter in Pisces, which made him a very soft soul, very compassionate. He loved people. The only thing that for him, which probably was happening, knowing that in this time, this is back when the record deals were happening, and the person that owned the record company would get the lion's share of what you made, and that's what he would have happened. His sensitive ways, his not wanting to confront, would really cause him to be more of taken advantage of. You know, thinking he was doing the right thing, thinking he was being loyal, thinking he was being a savior, thinking he was helping out, and he would easily be able to be taken advantage of. He also had a tendency to have addictions because of wanting to escape what was for him, as a very sensitive person, a very harsh world. It was a very hard world for him. Some people are so sensitive and they can take on the energy of things, and with him, he could take on the energy of any negativity that was around him, anything that was not good. He's going to take in the energy, and it's just going to resonate inside of him. Everything that happened to him in terms of his death was destined. That was destined for him, even with his father taking his life. When I look at, I'm going to go to the mom. And the mom's birthday was January 1, 1913. So here you've got 1-1, January 1 for Alberta, and you got Marvin Gaye, a number 1 year as well. So we've got everybody in this house doing what they want to do the way they want to do it. Nobody's being the boss of me. Her life path is number 7. So that tells me that she didn't just speak about religion. She was religious, period. I mean, she just had a strong faith in anything that had to do with God and Jesus and giving and helping. That was just the person that she was. She was super intelligent, but I think because of the era that she was in, she wasn't able to show that as much. Excuse me. Her personal year was 6, and she was in that number 6 year, actually. So for her, it was having to take care of everybody. She had to take care of Marvin because he wasn't doing well with his addictions. She had to take care of her dad her husband, because he was an alcoholic. She had to make sure the bills were paid. She had her other son living in a house in the back, the guest house. So she had a lot of responsibilities put on her, and Marvin being the number 1. Her rising is Aries, and that gave her some compatibility to her son, that kind of free-natured, having fun, laughter, rushing into things. Probably the way that she did this marriage. She's got a son in Capricorn, so she liked the way her son spoiled her financially. If you've ever seen the house, it's absolutely beautiful. So she liked that. She liked a life of luxury. However, she's got a moon in Scorpio, so she had very intense feelings. It was a lot of blowing up. It was, with Marvin as an Aries, her moon in Scorpio, that Cancer that both Marvin and the dad had. There was a lot of emotions, and there was a lot of intentions. Another thing that struck me funny in her chart is that she has a Venus in Aquarius, and I always know when you got a Venus in Aquarius, you love unusual things. You love different, I'll put it in quotation, different types of relationships. That's why her husband could cross-dress and sit around the house in a dress or a lady's pantsuit or a blouse and a hat and a wig, and he really did. Go online, you'll see. Look it up on YouTube. That she didn't mind that, okay, because of that Venus in Aquarius. That made her more open-minded, okay. She was open-minded in her love, and usually someone that has that placement, they will usually marry someone from a different race. They'll marry someone that is a different gender or different desires, something in that realm, and that was her. But she was very tense, very upset, very trying to keep the peace all of the time. And then we have the father. Oh, before we go to the father, let me tell you this. The house address of their street was 2101. 2101. If we add that across, that's a number 4 house. And in this case, this house was very ill-dignified because of the arguing, the fighting, the depression, the substance abuses, the random people coming in and out of the house, with everything that was going on in that house. So that number 4, as an ill-dignified house, caused the house to be rigid, stubborn. That's how people be feeling in that house. Very rigid, very stubborn, very frugal, a lack of tolerance for others, being over-controlling. If you look into the family dynamics, everything that is described as a number 4 house ill-dignified is the nature of what's happening in this house. If you take my numerology class, you'll find out about that. But let's look at Marvin. His birthday was October 1, 1914, Marvin Sr. So here again, we have a 1-1 and 1914, and the wife is 1-1, 1913. Everybody wanted to be right. Excuse me. Everyone wanted to be right. Everyone wanted to have the last say. Everyone wanted to be the leader. Everyone wanted to have the ideas. And the father was upset because he also had a number 8 life path. That means I'm the boss. And yet the mother was always turning to Marvin to help her financially or spiritually or whatever was needed. She would go to her son. she wouldn't go to her husband. She couldn't rely on him. Marvin Sr.'s rising as a Sagittarius, which is a real fun, freedom-loving type of energy that wants to do what they want to do, along with that number 8, I'm the boss type of energy. So it was as if I'm the boss, I'm going to control everything, I'm going to manage everything, but I'm doing whatever I want to do. I'm doing me. You're going to do what I tell you to do, but I'm going to do me. He had a son in Libra, which would make him seem like, okay, he could be a nice guy, maybe someone to talk to. He would definitely have a tendency towards religious connotations and things like that. Sometimes that Libra sun can have I'm not sure what I am on the sexuality. Please don't write me about that. It's just what I have noticed. It's occasionally that can happen with a male Libra. Most striking, though, he has a moon in Pisces. And a moon in Pisces, man, just like his son, he used to absorb negative energy tremendously. He would have liked to withdraw. He's passed away now, but he'd like to withdraw simply because he couldn't take the harsh world either. He was different. And in those times, being different like that was really different. You couldn't just come out like that, and he would do that, sitting around the house or be on the porch dressed very feminine. So he went into escapism, and that is one of the reasons why he was a heavy alcoholic, to escape the suffering that he always felt. He had a lot of self-pity for himself, more so about himself than he was about his family and his wife, his children. He was dreamy. He could not manifest clearly because he was like a fish that was lost in the midst of a whirlpool, and he couldn't find his way to stability. He had a Venus in Scorpio, so that meant that he was very intense in his feelings. He could be very possessive of people. He could be very obsessive of people. Another thing, he's got a Mars in Scorpio. That tells me right away, oh boy, this guy holds grudges and he seeks revenge immediately. He could either do it with his rising Sagittarius with his mouth, or he could do it in actions. He felt like he couldn't trust anybody. No, he didn't want anybody close to him. It was easy for him to close people off. And then he's got a Saturn, his Cancer in Saturn, so that tells me that he needed a lot of emotional support. He didn't like to lose control. He liked to seem as if he was on top of it, and yet he was an insecure person. He constantly needed to praise. But I don't know if Alberta was doing that, his wife, when Marvin was there, but when Marvin was around, he wasn't getting that at all. All her attention would go to Marvin because Marvin seemed to have more life in him at a time. It's interesting to me that you've got 3 individuals, all of them with many ones in their birthdays, which means that everybody wanted to do their own thing. Everybody wanted to go their own way. Everybody wanted to be the boss of something. The only reason that Alberta, although she could get upset and she could get very fiery and let you have it too, but she would be more low-key, is because of that 7 life path that said that she really, in this case as a Pentecostal woman, really lived by the terms of the old terms of the Bible, that the man was leader and the woman was behind, and you wait to him to invite you to speak. And as well as Marvin being extremely possessive, obsessive, jealous of his son, insecure emotionally, and a number 8 life path, wanting to be the boss. You can't be the boss if you're not capable of even taking care of self. If you're not strong enough to do you, you can't do me. And the family dynamics was really bad in this particular family. Could they have escaped this? Perhaps, but they all would have gone into counseling individually. They all had various addictions, and I would say that she was even addicted to the church and the Bible. You can overdo too much of anything, and I see that for her. And Marvin was destined for this. Everybody else had freedom. Yeah, that is that story. That is a sad story. This is about domestic abuse that happens in families every day, except for this one was on a grand scale. Anyways, if you like the story, please subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. Did you listen to Marvin Gaye? What was his favorite song for you? Anyways, thumbs up. Ring the bell. Now, hey, with the bell, they're telling me that you have to ring the bell, but where it says all, not personal. Not personal. It's like, don't ring the bell, personal and all. Click on it, you'll see what I mean. Do all. That way, when I drop a story, you can be there to receive it first. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.